Today, we have a crazy revenge story about OP's roommates stealing their stuff. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, don't come with me? Fine, someone else will. My partner, Roxy, lesbian for context, is an unhealthy level of jealous and an equally unhealthy level of unreliable. We have never had any issue with infidelity to warrant this unless you include her texting her exes for an ego boost every so often. We've been together nearly a decade, and in the last 2 months alone, she has missed or stood me up on several occasions, at least once a week, and if she's turned up, it's between 1 to 2 hours late. This includes a wedding and my rainbow baby niece's first birthday. If she's missed it, I've had to deal with explosive arguments about going with mutual friends instead, and how I spend time with everyone else. I'm always leaving early and always go with friends she wouldn't feel threatened by. Mutual friends are actually her friends I've made friends with, as she's not keen on mine. I've denied, cried, shouted, bargained, begged, and finally reached acceptance that she will never be a reliable partner and that she has no interest in attending things that don't directly benefit or interest her. This weekend is no different. I put a small, intimate wedding in her calendar in July, verbally confirmed with her, and 3 days beforehand, Roxy lets me know she's double booked with a flaky local school friend this week. There's not actually even a clash. She's meeting her friend in the evening for games. It's an alcohol-free morning wedding an hour away. The bride is understandably irritated. She's catered for one extra person who has effectively just decided she doesn't feel like it. Here's where I get petty. I've asked my old uni housemate, Alice, who lives in the area, to fill my already catered for +1 spot. Alice is straight as an arrow, but Alice is also a charismatic career woman and a part-time model, and she looks it. Alice attends film premieres for work. Anyway, I'm going to be in for heck when I get home. But that's fine, because I've booked the midnight train back. Roxy mistakenly thought I would cancel or come back early to clean up the house and sort food for her and her friend tonight. Ducky7979 commented, "In my honest opinion, enjoy the wedding with Alice and face your girlfriend when you get home. Tell her it's her fault and that you're done with her. She will always care about herself more than you or your wishes. I'm not saying she should devote herself to you and ignore all she wants to do, but be considerate and compromise. Plus, that being late crap is straight up disrespectful. Also, if she doesn't already know, don't mention Alice is straight, LMFAO. 3heathens_mom replied, "This was my thought as well. Why does OP stay in a relationship with a partner who seems very selfish and self-serving? I would be very concerned unless there's stripping evidence to the contrary if OP suffered, say, a health issue that required support from her partner that might not be received and the partner would be out. At least the post didn't try to say how partner is so wonderful in all or any other areas of the relationship. Also, hi, my name is Brendan, and if you guys enjoy these ProRevenge videos, it'd be awesome if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to our podcast. That said, our next story is a very petty revenge of an under 2-year-old. 35 plus years ago, my sister had 5 kids. This involves the 2 oldest and the youngest. I'm changing names for privacy. The 2 oldest were boys, Kurt, 14, and Jeff, 13. The youngest was a sassy little girl, Allie, around 20 months old. Kurt was kind and patient with Allie and would read to her and play games. It wasn't constant. He had other things to do being a teen and all, but if he was around, he would make it a point to give her hugs and attention. Jeff, on the other hand, couldn't be bothered. He wasn't mean to her, but he was impatient. He would yell at her if she touched his things or went into his room. If she approached him with a book or toy, he'd tell her to go away. Allie adored Kurt and gravitated towards him while pretty much ignoring Jeff. For some reason, this annoyed Jeff, even though he didn't want much to do with her. One morning before school, Allie was in her high chair and my sister was packing lunches. Jeff came into the room to grab his lunch before heading out to the bus. "Hi, Kurt," Allie said in her sweet little sing-songy voice. Jeff stopped, looked at her with annoyance and said, "I'm not Kurt, I'm Jeff. Say Jeff." So she said, "Jeff." Satisfied, he grabbed his lunch, told his mom goodbye, and as he left, Allie sweetly said, "Bye, Kurt." Jeff stopped and again told her he was not Kurt, he was Jeff. She just smiled sweetly and said, "Okay." Allie continued the hi Kurt, bye Kurt routine with Jeff for several days, and he was very irritated by it. My sister asked her why she was calling him by the wrong name, and Allie giggled and said, "It's funny, Mama." My sister couldn't believe this sassy little toddler came up with this pettiness all on her own. Sleeping Rosie commented, "Toddlers are funny. My mother-in-law was referred to Grandpa for almost a year by my son. He initially called her Grandma, but she ignored him whenever he called her that because it wasn't her preferred grandmother name. So my son decided if she's not Grandma, she must be Grandpa instead, and so he started calling her Grandpa." Our next story is, gave neighbor their yard waste back. A month ago, my neighbor had their trees trimmed, giant spruces. A few days later, I took my garbage out and noticed a 6-foot pile of brush against my back fence, from the ground to the top of my 6-foot fence, and bulging all the way to the road. Huge branches and tons of pine needles. I texted her and asked what her disposal plans were, and she said she wanted to move it gradually. I said that was not okay and I wanted it gone ASAP. I texted her again 2 weeks ago and she was not so polite, telling her my property was not free storage for her. She also uses a section against my house to store random crap. We've had unreasonably warm weather here in Canada until today, when it's now -20. So I went home for lunch, saw the pile still sitting and full of snow, and likely mice, and proceeded to throw it all onto her small parking pad where she keeps her garbage bins. Hopefully she moves it before it snows and freezes more. I'm now awaiting the irate texts. Zaiden V commented, "I had a neighbor cut his tree down and stored it on my property for 6 months. We both have large yards and he felt entitled. I posted an ad on Craigslist advertising free firewood. The whole pile was gone before he got home from work. Man, was he ticked and threatening to call the cops, until I mentioned that the wood was on my property. He never did that again." Our next story is, the story of how I got revenge on my jerk ex. So I dated a guy when I was 14 to 17, and it was a rough few years, from him becoming abusive to some of his friends bullying me, and this isn't a story about all that. It's about how I got my little bit of revenge. Being young and dumb, I stayed with my ex for way longer than I should have, and during that time, I made friends with 2 of his nicer friends who helped me during this. When I went to get my stuff, I left a fake positive pregnancy test in his room and also hid cheese slices everywhere. Cheese stinks after being left out for a while, and it's all I could afford. But that's not what the best bit of it was. I blocked him everywhere, but his lovely friends took a picture off my Insta when I met my nephew as a baby and proceeded to send my ex the photos of me holding him. Probably not the best revenge ever, but at least somewhere in my brain, I know he panicked. Rayman Genie 2020 commented, "It's the friend sending the picture of you with a baby that tops this off for me. Chef's kiss." Chai_latte_lover0 replied, "Honestly, massive props to that friend because it was his childhood best friend who sent it, and we wasn't talking. He didn't side with him or me, but didn't want to give up his longtime friend. After he sent it, he messaged me, and we've been friends ever since. He even counted the months to make sure that the timelines met up." Our next story is, get the downstairs neighbor back, finally. I know upstairs neighbors are usually the bane of all existence. I literally have no idea what my upstairs neighbor is doing every night at almost midnight exactly, but my downstairs neighbor is a true nightmare. I was warned about her when I first moved in, but oh boy, did I underestimate her. If you're assembling furniture after 5 p.m., when most people like me get off work, she will bash her broom into my floor. If I walk on the floor of my bedroom at night, she will bang her broom on my floor. She's complained to my super that it sounds like he drops things at night. One July 4th at midnight, she banged her broom on my floor because I walked to bed and stepped on the one creaky floorboard while I did. I stomped back, and then she sent her husband to literally scream at me for 3 minutes after I did that. Either way, she's wildly sensitive and majorly in need of a personality transplant. Luckily, I'm moving out in the morning, or I guess in 3 hours more since it's like 3:30 a.m. here. I've been cleaning and vacuuming all night, and around 12 o'clock she came up to yell at me. Luckily, I was taking some trash out while she did, and before she even got more than 2 words yelled out, I shushed her and then told her to speak to me in the morning. I'm sure she's been tossing and turning all night, just getting beyond ready to yell at me, but silly me forgot to tell her that I would be gone by then. I hope she pieces it together eventually, and I hope the next tenant isn't as introverted as me. She's got quite spoiled living below a mathematician for 2 years. I'm quite sure that finding someone who has few guests and makes less noise will be quite hard to find. Koigon commented, I would have brought an air horn and Dutch clogs, the wooden shoes. Walk around in the clogs until 8 or 9 p.m. If they come upstairs to yell at you, answer your door with air horn in hand. As soon as they start yelling, blast the air horn. Bonus points if you do this within the 30 days before you leave. Since evictions take time, if they complain to the manager, as they likely will, he won't be able to do anything to you before you're gone on your own. Our next story is killing them with kindness. Last evening I attended a football match. The stadium had staff deployed to enact crowd control measures. This meant that certain passageways and staircases were one way. I decided to take a rest at a resting area outside of the stadium before entering. However, as soon as I got up and descended a flight of stairs toward the stadium's entrance, I realized I accidentally left my phone behind. I turned around and attempted to return to the resting area at the top of the stairs, but was immediately stopped by a stadium staff member who said I was not allowed to return upstairs this way. The fastest way back to where I was a 90-second sprint through the shopping mall next to the stadium, compared to a simple 5-second ascent of the staircase I'm at. I begged the guy to please let me through. I left a valuable item behind and I could almost literally see it sitting on the bench up there. No dice, even though at that point in time, it was still 2 hours before the match, and the staircase was literally empty besides the two of us. The rest area is filled with people though, which was why I was desperate to get back before someone would even consider committing the crime of pocketing the phone I left behind. Long story short, I made the sprint back up via the long and correct way and succeeded in retrieving my phone. The family I was seated next to earlier very kindly looked after the phone for me when they noticed I left it behind, hoping that I would soon return. I descended the staircase again and almost decided to give the stadium staff a piece of my mind, but ultimately didn't, as I'm simply not the kind of person who likes making a scene, for better or for worse, and after all, they were just doing their job. What I did instead, as someone who often sends compliments via the recipient's website's feedback forms or email, was to send the following email to the feedback email of the stadium, after I've returned home from the match. Dear Stadium Management, I would like to commend a member of your staff during last evening's soccer match, omitted at stadium. I understand that due to crowd control measures, certain areas of the stadium was one way only. However, the staff member at the staircase at omitted was gracious enough to let me through up the staircase when I explained to him that I left my phone behind at the rest area at the top of the staircase. I feel that this is commendable, as he was able to judge the situation and let me respond to an emergency situation even though he was not supposed to let people go up the staircase. Though I did not manage to get his name, I hope you can send my compliments to him, and also hope that his fellow stadium staff members can learn such graciousness from him. Regards. Maybe the stadium management wouldn't do anything after reading this email, but ideally, the revenge would involve guilt-tripping this guy for putting me in a tight spot, when management eventually finds this guy to commend him for something he did not do. Though, if he gets punished by management for something he didn't do, that's revenge enough for me too. Either way, it's a win-win situation, especially since I managed to recover my phone in the end, albeit with 90 seconds of desperation. Megmelons55 commented, that's not really revenge. Those workers have to follow rules, and frankly, your not-so-special situation could just as easily have been made up to avoid the lineups or whatever. Be more careful with your stuff and maybe don't feel entitled to having rules bent for you. Our next story is, don't mess with a person's car. Hey guys, I live in an apartment complex with a parking lot at the ground floor of the building. Bear in mind, this is my secondary residence for the weekdays. I stay with my family about a couple hours away during the weekends. Anyways, my employer rented me a 3 BHK apartment in this building, considering that they accounted for my entire family staying with me, which they don't. They stay at our own house a couple hours away. I'm given 2 parking spots in the building's parking lot. Normally, I only use one because I drive over Monday mornings and drive back during the weekends to see my family. The other spot is mostly unused, but there's more than enough spots in this parking lot for all the residents in this building. So given that my second spot is mostly unused, an opportunistic neighbor of mine decided to start using my spot because it's got better shade than her parking spot. I'll be frank, I didn't realize this until recently. Recently, however, I invited my mom to stay over with me for a week, and she came separately in her own car. To my surprise, when she arrived, she said that our second spot was already occupied. I inquired with the security, and sure enough, he checked the number plate of the car in question, and it belonged to my neighbor. So he called my neighbor to respectfully move her into her designated spot. She didn't pick up the phone, so the security guard had to climb upstairs and knock on her door to bring her downstairs. Now, here's where she turns into a total bench. Instead of obliging, I'm not expecting an apology, which she's liable to give me, she starts arguing with the security guard. He said that he's following the rules and he doesn't really have any say regarding this. She reluctantly comes down to the parking lot and gives me the nastiest death stare. She hesitates but eventually moves her car to her spot, so that my mom could park. Bear in mind, my mom is just waiting in her car all along for my neighbor to move her car. Anyways, my neighbor then continues arguing with the security guard. Bless him for actually listening to her, but we didn't stick around. Me and my mom went to our apartment to get on with our lives. When my mom was leaving to go back home, she was horrified to see that her car had been keyed up really bad. Now, in that time frame, the only people that could have entered our parking lot is the security guards and our neighbors. I'm on great terms with all my other neighbors, except the one mentioned in this post. So there's a lot of reason to believe that she was responsible for this incident. When my mom reported the damage to me, I was outraged. For absolutely no reason, my mom's car was damaged. It's not like we did anything wrong. We got back a parking spot that was rightfully ours. So, of course, to teach this lady a lesson, I decided to damage her car. In the following days, I brought out my tools, and I left some really bad scratches on her front driver's side bumper. But I still felt that wasn't enough, so I decided to completely deflate two of her tires. I did this after I came back from work, under the pretense that I was checking on my own car. Sweet revenge was served. Needless to say, she was horrified the next day. She had to get her car towed, which I graciously saw over my balcony. And she was panicking because she was going to be extremely late to get to work. I smiled whilst watching this, almost feeling like a supervillain, but not really because she deserved it. My neighbor probably knows it's me, but hasn't pulled a stunt back at me. And that's my story behind why you never mess with another person's car. Thunderthighs94 commented, "Did you not at least report the vandalism to the security guy too? If she's unhinged enough to do that, she's probably already got a list of reasons to get evicted, and your complaint could be the last straw that gets management to actually start the eviction process. Also, time to install your own security cameras facing your parking lots and get a dash cam for your car. Then you'll have video evidence when she's dumb enough to do it again, or something similar, or something worse." Our next story is, James had a bad day at work. Part of my job involves calling a specific company several times a week to make sure they have correct information on files for our members. Usually the calls are pretty straightforward and take just 5 to 10 minutes. I called a few months ago and ended up with James' ID number XXXX, and he was one of those know-it-alls who makes life difficult for everyone. I'd give an ID number and the member's name, and he'd sigh and change the way the name was pronounced. William Smythe, and he'd pronounce the last E. Bain Johnston, and he'd pronounce the last E. He thought he was very smart, but really, how annoyingly wrong can you be? Then, when I'd tell him that I needed to update, he'd rephrase it to the exact same thing. So annoying. Really, if you hate your job that much, then find something else to do. The phone call that should have taken 10 minutes took 35, and at the end, I had to walk away from my desk to cool down. This morning I called and got James' ID number, XXXX, and this is where the games began. I made him repeat things over and over again, gave him wrong numbers that didn't come up in my system. Oops, sorry, it's this number. I made him wait while I checked my computer for things that were on a notepad in from me, so I didn't really need to check a single thing. He'd type in notes and then I'd apologize and change the information. He was ticked and you could hear it in his voice, but I was sweet as anything and didn't change my way of communicating at all. At the end of the call, when he asked if there was anything else I needed, I said, "No, James, you were so much more helpful this call than the last time we spoke," and hung up. Was I on the phone much longer than needed? You betcha. So worth it. can't wait to talk to James ID number XXXX again. Automatic Move 5976 commented, if James is part of a call center or larger group, if you reach him, you might either hang up and dial back immediately to get reassigned, or put him on hold and dial back to be extra sure you won't get James. Then play it off as your new company phone system is giving you fits, and it cut off calls randomly. Or worse, apparently when you get calls on hold, they stay on hold but disappear on your headset, and it won't let you go back to the call. Our next story is, petty sysadmin gets an hour of questions to reflect on life choices. So this happened years ago, but it still makes me smile. I moved countries and was on a temporary visa for a while, which meant I couldn't get a proper role in my existing profession, where I was a fairly experienced sysadmin for a popular package at the time used by many corporates. So I filled in the time with IT help desk first-line support, and in one role got a reputation amongst my peers for knowing this particular package pretty well. So I would get all those tickets. This was fine. I could usually figure the issue out way quicker than most of the guys, and if it needed something fixing behind the scenes, I would be able to let the local sysadmin know what the issue was for a quick fix. Win-win, right? No. The local sysadmin, let's call him AH, did not like anyone else in his little fiefdom, and would go out of his way to avoid applying any fix I'd suggested. Usually meaning the poor end user would get back to me days later wondering why the issue was still not fixed. It was because AH had done something unrelated that would never fix the problem, as he would not accept the real fix from me. I started managing him by not giving the fix, but nudging him in the right direction, and hoping he would not take it as a challenge to his authority, but rather something I was too dumb to figure out, so he could victoriously win one over me. I cared not at all, if it got the job done. The contract came to an end soon enough. My proper visa came through and I moved on and got a good role elsewhere, forgetting all about AH. One day, my new manager called me in to help interview a candidate for a role on our team. I walked in and was delighted to see AH waiting for us. He shook my manager's hand, then turned to me, and I watched as the recognition hit him and he visibly sagged. I said nothing, and was in fact very chirpy and friendly, asked extra questions, and was generally fascinated by what he had to say, particularly around team working and people skills. He was sadly unsuccessful in his application, largely due to me telling my boss what a douche AH was immediately the interview was concluded. My favorite part was that all the way through the interview, we both knew he wasn't getting the job, but I got to make him sit through it anyway. And people say the universe doesn't care? Delicious. A funny boy commented, I once was in an interview and saw a couple of Adam Henrys I'd worked with before. I asked the interviewer if I would be working with those two. He answered yes. I said I was not interested and left before the interview got started. Our next story is, roommate kept using my makeup without asking, so I'd made sure she'd never do it again. I shared an apartment with a girl who had no concept of boundaries. She constantly borrowed my stuff without asking. Clothes, shoes, and worst of all, my makeup. I told her countless times to stop, but she always brushed it off like it wasn't a big deal. The last straw came when I found out she had used my expensive foundation for a party and didn't even bother cleaning the bottle. That's when I decided it was time to teach her a lesson. I went out and bought a cheap, old foundation from the dollar store and swapped it with mine, adding a bit of self-tanner to the mix. I left it in plain sight on my vanity and waited. Sure enough, the next weekend, she waltzed out of the bathroom with an orange face. I didn't say a word as she headed off to her party. The next day, she came home furious, complaining that people had been laughing at her all night. I just smiled and said, "Oh no, maybe it wasn't your shade." She didn't touch my stuff again after that. Heebie-Jeebies 386 commented, "Nice. I knew someone whose roommate liked to use her perfume, so pried it open when it got low and peed in it. Hid her new bottle and left the pee cologne out. Chick doused herself in pee and was none the wiser. Fabulous job on the foundation concoction." Our next story is, suck it, Grandma. I used to be a fat kid. Most of my family is obese or have some health issues relating to it. Every time I tried saying I wanted to lose weight as a kid, my grandmother wouldn't leave the drive-thru until I got something. Heck, I couldn't save food for later because she made me eat it even if I was full or didn't want it. TBF was a picky eater. So then I had a whole lot of issues and got burns under my elephant titties and needed powder. When I finally got away from her, I had a diabetic scare. I worked out, and when she found out I was losing weight by accident, my mom let it slip, she said I give him a week. My mom then grilled her and told her I've been going for a month. Those words are at me, and I eventually gave up. This year I got rejected and another diabetic scare, so I took it seriously. Used to be 6'2", 300 pounds, and now 256 pounds. My back issues are gone, girls are talking to me more since I don't smell, and my personality got better. My mom lost weight too, and family members started noticing. My sister is currently going for it since she got freshman 15 at her college. My aunt recently asked me what I did, and I'm overall in a great mood mentally. Guess who has diabetes and who probably doesn't? This guy. I'm going to get tested again. She's now staying over for God knows how long. Seeing her glare at me during her stay here brings me nothing but joy. My doctor told me to walk my imaginary dog and exercise. She has actually acknowledged my weight loss, but when people on the phone see me in the background of her calls, they start complimenting me and she gets quiet all of a sudden. Those words she used to ruin my motivation is now lifting me to new highs. Hatred and pettiness is the only thing motivating me. Take that, you chicken cutlet, ham-legged, circular sausage-filled, meat-sweat, full-speed, waddling-looking butt. When weight loss is brought up, you try to make yourself invisible, but I see you. I'm scared of needles, and even entertaining the thought of being like you fills me with disgust. I know you're trying to sabotage me every day and glaring when I reject your food, or I just fast after. I used to walk around shirtless out of uncomfortability. But now I occasionally do it to spite you. Make all the digs you want at me. I don't care, it means you're watching. Watching me, the firstborn grandson, your granddaughter, and my mom losing weight and seeing the misery on your face brings me joy. Doing something I know you failed at and mocked me for, even considering as a kid, is the only reason I'm excited for school, so I can go to my weightlifting class. You waddle while I can run. Stare. Stare at my smaller man boobs. Look at me walking without breathing heavy. Still no girlfriend though. Advanced Pair 4606 commented, I hope this question isn't taken wrong, but are you Hawaiian or Samoan? I ask because I grew up with a lot of Hawaiians and Samoans, and every time they tried to drop a few pounds, their parents, or especially their grandparents, would inevitably try to fatten them up some more. I could never figure out why, but I assume there was a cultural significance. Phoenix Galaxy replied, Don't be afraid to ask. I'm African American. At least where my grandmother lived, food was a major part of my life when I lived with her for a year or two. Heck, it played a part of why I want to be a chef and taking classes for it. 100% because a lot of my culture involves food. With that being said, that's all the time we have for today. If you enjoyed today's video, drop a like and comment below, and if you want to check out our other videos, click the video on the right. With that being said, I'll see you all next time.